Hello YouTube, Snowflarky Zemos, and I am here today with my Dragon Gemini deck profile. Given my love of normal monsters, Geminis are naturally a type of card that that catch my attention, given that they can be normal monsters or they can be effect monsters. So that lets me play around with lots of normal monster synergies and lots of cool things. And when the Chemi Critter support came out, that was just generic Gemini support. It gave Geminis lots of cool tools, nothing that got too much attention because it's not competitive, but it really lets you play a cool Gemini playstyle, and I think it's good support to kind of live the Gemini dream, and has made it's given me several fun decks to play in a casual setting, this being one of them. This utilizes a lot of that Gemini support with some Dragon Gemini monsters, which are pretty cool, have cool effects, and of course with Dragon support that is in Yu-Gi-Oh! Can let you do some cool stuff with it. So, without further ado, let's get into the card by card. Starting with our monster lineup, I am playing two copies of the Red Eyes Black Flare Dragon. This is a very cool Gemini card, support for the Red Eyes, but in this deck, it's kind of doing its own thing. A 7-star monster with 2,400 attack, but Gemini's got plenty of ways to get this onto the field easy, so we don't have to worry about that. Like all Gemini monsters, this card, while it's in your hand and in the graveyard, is a normal monster. And if you want to make it an effect monster, you have to use an additional normal summon in order to do so. When you make Red Eyes Black Flare Dragon an effect monster, it gains the effect that uh, if damage calculation is performed involving this card at the end of the battle phase, you can inflict damage to your opponent's life points equal to this card's original attack. So that's pretty cool. If you could get in with a direct attack with Black Flare with that effect, you do 2,400 damage plus its effect will burn for another 2,400, which is 4,800. And this deck has quite a few ways to punch in extra damage and close a game quick, which is important because this is a stun deck. So once you get your lock, you want to close out the game quickly. Black Flare is in here, of course. Its 7-star normal synergy allows us to play Champion's Vigilance, and its 2,400 attack line will allow us to utilize a trap card we'll see later in the build, Dragon's Bind, which is a big win con of this deck. Coming up next, we are playing two copies of the Black Stone of Legend. Given that this isn't a very combo-oriented deck, we want to keep the monster count low, so we're only playing two copies of Blackstone. One of these would probably be another copy of Black Flare if I had one, but, playing two Blackstone is perfectly fine. What Blackstone does, of course, is that you contribute this card to special summon a level 7 or lower Red Eyes monster from your deck, except Red Eyes Black Chick. So Blackstone, you tribute it off, you can get your Red Eyes Flare right onto the field, and that's pretty sweet. We definitely want it there. And then, of course, if this card is in your graveyard, you could target a level 7 or lower Red Eyes monster in your graveyard, except Red Eyes Black Chick, shuffle it into the deck, and if you do, add this card to your hand. Now, you can only use one effect of Blackstone of Legend per turn, so you can't shuffle it back and then normal summon Blackstone and tribute it. You have to wait one more turn, but it gives you some recycling, which is pretty cool. You can save it for another turn, and just another tool to get to our Red Eyes. And then, of course, last for our monster count, I am playing 3 copies of Chthonian Emperor Dragon. A very cool monster. It's 6-star, 2,400 dragon. Again, that 2,400 stat line is really good for our Dragon's Bind Trap card that we'll see later. And of course, this card is a normal monster, like all Geminis, but when you Gemini summon it, it gains the effect that this card can attack twice during the same battle phase, which is pretty sick. That clears a lot of monsters, pushes for extra damage, because once you have your opponent locked out, you just want to close out the game quickly, and this card does an excellent job at doing that. And that is it for our monsters. Next up, we are going into our spell cards. Starting off, I'm playing 3 copies of Catalyst Field. This is the Gemini field spell. It allows you to, once per turn, normal summon a level 5 or higher Gemini monster from your hand without tributing, so that's nice. Get Black Flare or Emperor Dragon just right onto the field. And you get an additional normal summon of a Gemini monster per turn. So that in theory means you could summon 2 Gemini monsters if you wanted, or you can summon the Gemini monster from your hand and then immediately normal summon it again to get its effect rolling. So that really helps this deck move. In addition, Catalyst Field has another effect that is quite useful. You can banish a Gemini monster you control that currently has gained its effects until the end of your opponent's turn, and if you do, you can target and destroy a card on the field. So that's pretty nice. It can remove your monster off the field to dodge removal if you're expecting it to be removed on your opponent's turn. Can destroy a card, of course, and very important for this deck is the juggling of the Gemini monsters from normal monsters to Gemini monsters. Usually, because of some of the trap cards I'm running in this build, I want to make sure one of these is always treated as a normal monster. So when it returns from the field, it will be a normal monster again. So, doing that kind of manipulation is pretty important. And, with this card being able to summon our monsters, definitely a card we want to see. Now, in order to search it, I am playing 2 cards. Of course, I am playing 1 copy of Terraforming. Terraforming searches a field spell, of course. But Catalyst Field actually has its own in-archetype searcher, which is Dimmer Synthesis. You can activate one of these effects. You can either add a Catalyst Field from your deck to your hand, which is what we're using, or we add a Burnout and 1 Chemi-Critter monster from your deck to your hand. Now we're not playing any of that in here, so only that effect of grabbing Catalyst Field matters. Except this card also has an additional effect that you can banish this card from your graveyard, then target 2 face-up monsters you control, one of which being a Gemini monster that has its effects. And if you do, you make one monster's attack 0, and you make the other monster gain that attack. So that's a pretty cool effect, because say if you have Black Flare and Emperor Dragon on the field, you can, have your Gemini summoned Red Eyes Black Flare, use Synthesis from the grave. You can give the 2400 attack to Emperor Dragon, and then you can use Catalyst Field to bounce this out, pop a card, and you get 4800 attack monster that can attack twice. Pretty cool. Definitely comes in handy, and probably better to run 2 of this card over the 1 copy of Terraforming just because of that additional effect, but I just have the 1, so that's what we're playing right now. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Pot of Extravagance, another trap card heavy deck from myself, and you don't go into a lot of extra deck monsters. You want to keep your Geminis on the field for, the Dragon's Bind synergy. So we turn our extra deck into card advantage by banishing 3 to 6 random cards. We draw 1 card for every 3 that we did. So for 6 extra deck monsters, this becomes draw 2, and we very much want to see that. Next up, I'm playing a copy of Card of Demise. There are a lot of turns that you will not be special summoning at all because the Catalyst Field additional summons are all normal summons, which is pretty sweet. So, unless you're using Blackstone of Legend, then you can easily Card of Demise, get a lot more cards in your hand, especially trap cards to set, and another reason that we are playing a low monster count. So Geminis make a great Card of Demise deck. And under the same logic of not special summoning a lot, I am playing 3 Pot of Duality for consistency's sake. Get us that key card we need by revealing the top 3. We add 1 to our hand and shuffle the rest back. Now we can't special summon, but that's okay. Most times we're just normal summoning multiple monsters, and we definitely want the boost to grab whatever specific card we need, and that is our spell cards. Next, we're going to take a look at the trap cards here. I am playing 2 copies of Gemini Ablation. This is a really cool support for Geminis that came out a little more recently. During the main phase, you can discard 1 card from your hand to activate one of these effects. The only one that matters is this first effect, special summon a Gemini monster from your deck that as an effect monster that is treated its effect. Its other effect revolves around Fire Warriors, which we aren't playing. So in this deck, we only use Gemini Ablation for that first effect. Essentially, we can just discard any excess card to pull a Gemini right out of our deck with its effects. Pretty sweet. Sometimes, if we didn't open with one, but we open with Gemini Ablation, we want to do that just so we can get the monster on its field to get Dragon's Bind live. Speaking of which, I've talked about it a couple times, but I am playing 3 copies of Dragon's Bind. This is one of my favorite just silly forgotten trap cards that is basically kind of the win con of this deck. Dragon's Mine is a trap card that says activate this card by targeting a dragon type monster you control with 2,500 or less attack. So of course Red Eyes and Chthonian Emperor both have 2,400, so that is just short of the 25, which means they're all valid targets, and being that they were pretty easy to summon, I figured this card was a shoo-in. Essentially, once you do that, neither player can special summon monsters with attack less than or equal to the original attack of that monster. So, 2,400 attack or less monsters can no longer be special summoned, and a lot of times, if you time it right or in the right matchup, you just win the game right there. Definitely a card that I enjoy being able to throw in a new deck. It's a fun card to do in a going first armed dragon deck. And when I saw this card, I was like, naturally, the Geminis with 2,400 attack, they're kind of built to use this. So, play Dragon's Bind and win the game with it. Pretty sweet. Next up, I am playing 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. When you got these fragile stun decks that got a lock like that, you want to make sure your opponent's out to it doesn't go off successfully. So if they have spell and trap removal to get rid of your Dragon's Bind, to get rid of whatever key piece will let them really start playing their deck, you want to make sure you say no to that by having your life points Solemn Judgment. Now, given that Gemini monsters are normal monsters, we can also play 3 copies of Fists of the Unrivaled Tenyi. This is one of the reasons that you want to balance whether you've actually Gemini summoned your Gemini monster or not, because if it's not and still a normal monster, we can use Fists of the Unrivaled Tenyi. This basically says when a spell, trap, or monster effect is activated while you control a face-up non-effect, which Gemini monsters before they are Gemini summoned count as normal monsters, you can negate the activation. And then, of course, if the set card you control is destroyed by your opponent's card effect, you can special summon a non-effect monster from your extra deck. So pretty cool. Has an effect that gets you a monster if it gets destroyed. Otherwise, it's another Solemn just for holding off on Gemini summoning. So always keep in mind how many of this you have access to before you Gemini summon. And last, for the big negate cards, I am playing 1 copy of Champion's Vigilance. Now, this one is only live with Red Eyes Black Flare on the field. But, so, we're only running it at 1 copy, but this one just says if you control a level 7 or higher normal monster, when it's Solemn Judgment, you can negate a summon or a spell and trap card. Very cool. We just want to make sure we have Red Eyes, and because of that, we're only playing this at 1. But very cool card for Chemi Critter and Gemini decks in general. Next up, we want to play some general good stuff trap cards. So we are playing 2 copies of Heavy Stormduster. This is for when we go first and don't want to deal with other back row decks. We want this trap card that can pop 2 spell or traps, gain us some card advantage, activate it at the end of your opponent's turn so they can't chain what they set. Very nice. Next up, since we are playing so many trap cards, I am playing 2 copies of Waking the Dragon. Definitely only 2 because Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi is also a Waking the Dragon, just a weaker one. Don't summon an auto win monster necessarily, but Waking the Dragon can take care of those who want to blindly hit our back row. If this set card in its owner's control has left the field and is now in the graveyard or banished zone because of an opponent's card effect, you can special summon a monster from your deck or extra deck. Sometimes if you want to get the special summon lock, it's even worth summoning the Gemini monster out the deck if it means a live Dragon's Bind. But, usually something like Harpy's Feather Duster procs that, so not necessarily what we're looking for. Next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Solemn Strike. 1,500 life points, negate a special summon or a monster effect. So, a problematic effect comes up that's going to out your board, going to out your Dragon's Bind. We don't want nothing to do with that, so we pay 1,500 and negate it. And next up, in case your Dragon's Bind isn't up and they have big monsters, I am playing 3 copies of Storming Mirror Force. Also, another card that pairs well with Waking the Dragon, because once your opponent sees this, they're going to want to destroy your back row before they activate it. Storming Mirror Force just says when an opponent's monster declares an attack, return your opponent's attack position monsters to the hand. So it's non-destruction, non-targeting, very cool trap card, and has a big payoff. A bit of a risk, but it's worthwhile. This trap card lineup, of course, would change depending on the matchup, but I'm still rocking Storming Mirror Force for the time being. And that is it for our main deck. Next, we'll go into our extra deck. While our extra deck is mostly just extravagance fodder, you can put some good cards in it to summon off of Waking the Dragon, so I'll just run through kind of the core Waking the Dragon targets. Of course, the first one is Last Warrior from Another Planet. If you're Waking the Dragon procs and your opponent has an empty board, Last Warrior from Another Planet, of course, makes it so that neither player can summon monsters. If they can't summon monsters, you can, just beat down your opponent relentlessly until they lose the game, or stall them for a significant amount of time. Cool thing about this card in this deck is that if your Gemini monster is currently banished because of Catalyst Field, and then you get to summon Last Warrior, well, your monster will still return at the end phase because it's not considered a summon. So that's pretty cool. Get you some extra attack power, which is nice. Next up, I'm playing 2 copies of Naturia Exterio. This is your auto win against decks that are very reliant on their spell or trap cards. Essentially, it can negate either of them. You just got to banish a card from the grave and then send a top card of your deck to the graveyard. That definitely would be a card I would run 3 of, but since I only have 2, to fill in the 3rd slot, I'm playing 1 copy of Naturia Beast. This, of course, is Exterio, except it only negates spells. Often that's just what you need, so if you don't have your Exterios, sometimes Beast will do the job. Next up, I'm playing 3 copies of Raid Raptor Ultimate Falcon, 3,500 attack monster that is unaffected by other card effects. Makes it pretty hard to out. Kaiju it, beat it over by battle, not too many options. Some decks just can't handle it, and they'll lose. Next up, a weaker version of Ultimate Falcon, Yugioh Final Sigma. It's got 3,000 attack, but is unaffected by card effects other than Mathmech cards if it's in your extra monster zone, which is fine. That's where we'll put it. We don't need it for anything else. The only trade-off is that it has an additional effect that makes it so if it does battle damage to your opponent by battling a monster, that damage is doubled. That can come in handy sometimes, so pretty cool to have. And then, of course, last, I am playing 3 copies of the Blue Eyes Alternative Ultimate Dragon, 4,500 attack monster that cannot be targeted or destroyed by card effects. Not as good as being unaffected, but, some matchups, that's still just enough that they can't handle it, especially with the extra 1,000 attack over Ultimate Falcon. Makes it fairly worthwhile, and instead of attacking, you can pop a card. So that flexibility is nice to have. So I'm glad to play that. You can sub out some of those cards like Mathmech Final Sigma, even Last Warrior for 3 copies of big non-effect monsters to summon off of your Fist of the Unrivaled Tenyi. I would recommend 3 copies of Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon because it's 4,500, and 3 copies of Master of Oz because it's 4,200. Plenty of different options, though. You could play Rivalry of the Warlords to make everything dragon, and then you might want Meteor Dragon. But you got options. These are just examples of cards you would run 3 copies of. I would probably replace this one and this one if I did, just because Last Warrior is, kind of easy to out, and your opponent can just set. So, have that in mind as an option. Definitely something I'm going to be testing out soon, so I just figured I'd share that now and keep that in mind. So that is it for the Dragon Gemini deck profile. Very cool, unique stun deck to, just build and play at Duel Night. Nothing crazy, the Gemini stuff. Nothing competitive, but there's a lot of fun things you can do with it. Lots of cool Gemini monsters, and I've always enjoyed both Red Eyes, Black Flare, and Chthonian Emperor Dragon, so I thought this was a fun deck to put together so I can play those cards. They are very sick looking, and it's very cool to be able to actually use Dragon's Bind to such a powerful such a powerful lockout, and then their Gemini effects really work with that Dragon's Bind strategy because once you have it locked, their Gemini effects both help close out games really quickly by packing on extra damage, and that's the kind of thing you need. So pretty sweet. Let me know how you feel about Gemini monsters. If you like this build, what your favorite Gemini monsters are. If you're doing anything with the Geminis, you'll definitely see more Gemini decks on here because I have a couple different builds. Uh, but I'm glad you stuck around and viewed it. Hope you enjoyed. I'll catch you in the next one.